meeting ranga. Can we start?
Oh, I think so, sir. Yes, sir. We'll start, sir.
Yeah. Who
Bhuvan,
is
sir, let
available?
them start presenting, sir.
Sai, are you there? Sai Dikshit?
Yes, sir.
What is your, I think you have been given a topic, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
You can start with your topic.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am.
Uh,
Today's my topic is oral factor 10A inhibitor, sir.
okay.
First,
All the four topics today were questions in the last DNB exam paper. Okay. Are you
Okay,
aware
sir.
of that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so can go ahead and discuss about it.
Okay, sir.
Mm.
First, I'll draw blood coagulation pathway, sir. Intrinsic extension pathway.
Very good.
In that, I'll mention 10A inhibitors where they will act. Then I'll write factor 10A inhibitors drugs which are come under. Direct 10A inhibitors, sir. These are new drugs, sir. Available are rivaroxaban and apixaban and edoxaban, sir. Others are under trial, sir. Like
Okay.
metrixaban, YM 150 and TAK 442, sir.
Okay.
Intrinsic pathway, like contact factors, is important in vitro for the initiation of the coagulation cascade, sir. This
Okay.
is by APPT, sir. Then I will discuss each drug, sir, like rivaroxaban, apixaban, sir. This rivaroxaban inhibits both free and bound factor 10A inhibitors in prothrombinase complex, sir. Bioavailability is 80 to 100%, sir. Administration only orally, sir. And pharmacokinetics maximum effect for 2 hours, sir. T off is 5 to 9 hours, sir. And it is metabolized by CYP3A4, sir, in the liver. 25% it is metabolized and excreted in the feces, remaining thing. And daily dosage is 20 mg, sir. For acute venous thromboembolism, we can give 15 mg and 10 mg, sir. Precautions should be avoided in the lactating women and renal and liver failure patients, sir. And bleeding manifestation should be monitored frequently in a cases of patient who are already in antiplatelets, sir. Indications of rivaroxaban are in non-valvular AF, sir, and DVT and pulmonary embolism, sir. And the contraindications in renal and liver failure, sir. And patient are already on ketoconazole and ritonavir, sir. And next drug, apixaban, sir. This is also direct 10A inhibitor, sir, but bioavailability is only 50%, sir. Administered only orally, sir. And max effect for 3 to 4 hours, sir. The T off is 9 to 14 hours, sir. Metabolism is same as like rivaroxaban, the metabolism by cytochrome P3A4, sir. And exudate in the feces and the urine and biliary system, sir. Precautions are the same like rivaroxaban only, sir. Should be avoided in the lactating and pregnant women, sir. The indications and adverse effects also same as like rivaroxaban, sir. Indications like non-valvular AF, DVT, and pulmonary embolism, sir. Next, I would like to write anesthetic implications, sir. Actually, there is a risk of bleeding in the major surgeries and neuroaxial procedures, sir. According to ASRA guidelines for oral 10A inhibitors, sir, before procedure we have to stop 72 hours prior the procedure, sir. And other than neuroaxial procedures, we have to restart after 6 hours, sir. After 6 hours of procedure, if it is a neuroaxial procedure, we have to withhold the medications before catheter removal is time period is 22 to 26 hours, sir. And restart the medication after catheter removal is 6 hours, sir. For apixaban also, before procedure, we have to stop 72 hours before the procedure, we have to stop, sir. And after the procedure, we can start after 6 hours of the procedure, sir. If it is neuraxial procedures, before catheter removal, we have to hold medication for 26 to 30 hours, sir. And for after catheter removal, we can restart this medication for 6 hours, sir. Bridging therapy with low molecular heparin can be considered during the time that oral anticoagulants is suspended, sir. If there is an increased risk of thrombotic risk. Before proceeding for any surgery like any uniaxial procedures, we have to check PTINR, APTT ratio, and BTCT, sir. If it is delayed, we have to postpone the procedure or surgery until values remains normal, sir.
That's all?
That's it, sir.
Okay. See, the main reason why they have to introduce a new drug like this, is there any name for them as a collective group, this rivaroxaban or apixaban?
Rivaroxaban.
It is called novel oral anticoagulant agents.
Yes,
Novel oral anticoagulant, NOAC.
Yes, sir.
And their main reason for their introduction is their shorter duration of action compared to warfarin, which is considered as the ideal drug for thromboprophylaxis, especially in patients with atrial fibrillation and other arrhythmias. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Because the onset and offset of action of warfarin is almost, as you said, 72 hours. And I think the guidelines, where did you get it from? All the duration, when should you stop and when should you restart? Because the
As
major advantage they claim about this is because of the short duration, you can afford to stop it much earlier, much lesser time compared to warfarin. Warfarin, you have to wait for at least 3 days for the full effect to go, and you have to give vitamin K to counteract that. And if it is an emergency, you have to keep fresh frozen plasma ready for any eventual bleeding diathesis, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Whereas for this, it is not required. And second thing is, for warfarin, we always go for the INR, PT-INR as a guideline for that. And this much of strict vigilance or strict monitoring is not required for this oral newer anticoagulant agent because of their shorter duration of action again. So these are considered as the advantages over this. So, at the introduction, as you rightly said, you can first draw the coagulation pathway and give a little more description about what is 10A actually. 10A is an activated factor of 10, isn't it?
Yes,
So
sir.
it is stimulated both by the intrinsic pathway as well as by the extrinsic pathway. Okay.
Yes,
So
yes, sir.
that drawing, if you give, it will look nice where it is going to exactly. And then from 10A, it is going to activate the 5A, and then 2A, then 1A. Like that, it is going to go as a cascade. And it is the amplification stage and supportive stage that there's good picture or drawing available in the one of the articles where you can first write that, and then you can mark the point where it exactly blocks. I will try to see whether I can. Is it visible for all of you? Are able to see this diagram? I think it will be upside down. Okay. Anyway.
It's seen, sir. It's seen, sir.
So this is a good picture I got for this particular answer. So you can see all the two pathways that are given here, and the initiation phase and the amplification phase that is seen there. And then you can see all the steps there finally, finally you have to convert fibrinogen into fibrin. That is the ultimate step in the coagulation pathway. And how exactly? So the 10A activation is done both by the intrinsic as well as the extrinsic pathways. So you write all that and then go ahead and say about the advantages of this drug over the warfarin. Okay, that is the main point that they expect from this answer, I think. Okay.
Okay.
And So that is a fairly decent answer. So individually, you can mention the individual drugs later on because the question does not mention any particular brand name or a particular type of the oral anticoagulant. So you can
Okay.
say these are all the available drugs under this category. And of course, you have mentioned about the pharmacokinetics and the pharmacology of those drugs. That is well accepted. Okay. So you can add these 3 points. That is, it is marketed as a substitute or a replacement for warfarin because of the disadvantage of prolonged onset and offset of action of warfarin and the requirement of vitamin K for counteracting its effect in case of emergency and the intense monitoring that is required with warfarin. All these three have been to so many extent not required when you use this newer anticoagulant agent. Okay, so that is the point you have to highlight in this answer. Okay,
Okay, sir.
so otherwise this is what is required for this question. Okay,
Okay,
right.
sir.
So one more thing. So he said he fairly said quite clearly about the duration of when to stop the drug, when to start the drug, and all that. But he didn't mention exactly about the epidural catheter. Though he kept saying catheter, he didn't mention clearly. I think that should be mentioned because that is something which that they're looking for.
Yeah,
We're talking about this. Plus, you don't have to waste time on bridging therapy and all. We're not talking about anticoagulants and other things in this topic. This particular topic is only about NA, only about the drugs. So you don't have to talk about bridging therapy and all that because you're wasting time when you're doing that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam. Shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah. Yes, you can go.
Next,
I'll only present, sir. Hello, sir.
Who is presenting? Try person is there?
I'll only present, sir. Try.
you're presenting, yes. Okay, that's I think you want to continue with the trial also, sir.
Okay. Oh, Muttumani is not available, is it?
Sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Try, sir. Its full form is transnasal humidified rapid insufflation ventilatory exchange, sir. It is a technique that uses rapidly insufflated, heated, and humidified gases administered via high flow nasal cannula, sir, to achieve apneic oxygenation and ventilation. It is a physiological mechanism for oxygenation and ventilating patients who are under GA and who have diminished or absent respiratory effort. Physiology behind Thrive is ventilation without ventilatory movements, sir. That is oxygenation and CO2 clearance in the absence of lung ventilation, sir. With the Thrive, ventilation occurs with a non-invasive nasal rather than a tracheal cannula, sir, and can be continued during the efforts to secure a airway. That is given as a notice that, sir, means nasal oxygenation during efforts of securing a airway, sir, securing a tube. High flow nasal oxygenation at the rate of 70 to 90 liters per ml enters the nose, loops around the soft palate, and exit through the mouth, sir, and creates a highly turbulent primary supraglottic vortex, which constantly replenishes pharynx with oxygen and prevents entrainment of room air, sir. This vortex effectively bypasses the upper airways, which account for approximately 50% resistance of entire respiratory system to airflow. These high flow, which are made possible through warming and humidification, also generates a positive airway pressure, even if the mouth is also open, which in turn reduces upper airway collapsibility and distal airway atelectasis, sir. This primary vortex cannot extend deep into the trachea and cannot itself account for the observed level of gaseous exchange, sir. The term apneic ventilation results to be the result of an interaction between primary supraglottic vortex from above and cardiogenic oscillations from below. These cardiogenic oscillations result from an compression and expansion of small airways brought about by blood and leaving and entering the thoracic cavity with each heartbeat, sir. The typical amplitude of cardiogenic breath is around 7 to 15 ml per heartbeat, sir. Normally, cardiogenic oscillations result in small volume mass movements of gas exchange within the trachea. With drive, this volume is flushed into the supraglottic vortex during cardiogenic is removed and is replaced by 100% oxygen, sir. Cardiogenic inspiration moves this oxygen outwards the distal airway and also enters the turbulence, which enhances intratracheal mixing, sir. Uses of this thrive is in reduced oxygen reserve patients such as pregnancy, sepsis, obesity, and bowel obstruction, sir. For procedural sedation such as bronchoscopy, ERCP, and ECT. In shared airway conditions such as microlaryngoscopy, surgical airway, and impossible airway traits such as trismus, reduced neck movements, and pharyngeal stenosis, sir. And also in difficulty airway patients also, sir.
So completed.
Sir, yes, sir.
Have you seen a Thrive machine in your hospital? Do you have a facility of using that Thrive
In
machine? Huh?
in outside hospitals, COVID patients used to.
You have seen that, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So when they ask, what is the Thrive the machine which has been introduced first, or something else was introduced earlier before that? You said about node DSAT and all that. What is the purpose of this node DSAT? Why it was introduced first of all?
To prevent, to decrease apneic.
Increase safe apnea time.
Yes, sir.
Increase safe apnea time. That is the first and foremost wording you should have written in this answer. Okay. The introduction of high flow nasal oxygen was done to introduce safe apneic oxygen, apnea time during the procedure of securing the airway. That was the first purpose for which all these things were done. Earlier, what we were doing is we used to pre-oxygenate the patient with a mask ventilation, with the patient breathing spontaneously, fill the lungs with 100% oxygen so that we can convert the entire FRC into 100% oxygen from room air, or otherwise called denitrogenation. So that the minimum required oxygen per minute is 250 ml and your FRC is supposed to be 2500 ml. So if you replace that with 100% oxygen, the entire 2500 ml becomes oxygen. So you have 10 minutes time for the patient to desaturate. Even exactly if it is not 10 minutes, it will be at least 8 minutes till the time the patient starts desaturating. Okay. So in order to achieve that time, save time for apnea, in cases of anticipated difficult airway or during training procedures when you allow a PG to intubate and he takes a little more longer time than an experienced anesthesiologist, the patient will be still safer without going in for hypoxemia. Okay, that was the first purpose. But with holding this mask and taking it off and trying to do that, it limits your time up to say maximum 8 to 10 minutes at the most. But if you want to continue the apneic oxygenation without desaturating the patient, the first step they did was to add nasal cannula with a normal flow rate of 2 to 4 liters, which will be continuously flowing, and you will get some additional oxygen going, but it is not 100% foolproof method to prolong the apnea time without desaturation. Then they started increasing the flow rate from 4 liters to 10 liters, 15 liters, so that the percentage of FiO2 will increase and the volume and mass will be increasing to push the oxygen down the respiratory passage because the patient is not now breathing. So this is what is called apneic oxygenation technique. And because oxygen is being taken up by the blood constantly, 250 ml will be taken. whereas only 10 to 20 ml of carbon dioxide will be released back into the alveoli. So there is a sort of negative pressure created, and with the continuous flow of oxygen, it will be stuck to the alveoli and the oxygenation will go on. That is the mechanism which has to be explained in this sort of techniques. But the dry gases that are given will cause problem to the respiratory epithelium. So in order to avoid that, they started humidifying it and heat up the gases that are giving and started giving it at a very high flow rate so that it will reach the alveoli. And here you have to mention about the alveolar equation to achieve what amount of oxygenation you can achieve. That equation also has to be mentioned, and the formula has to be mentioned there, so that how
Okay.
the oxygenation is taking place. And the difference between apneic oxygenation and this thrive is actually ventilatory exchange. So in the apneic oxygenation technique, they had one drawback. Even though you are able to achieve 100% oxygenation, this buildup of CO2 was occurring because CO2 was not getting eliminated. So patients started becoming hypercarbic. In fact, some of the studies, they found that even children who were undergoing apneic oxygenation technique had a CO2 of 62 mm after about 10 minutes. So that became a headache. So patients went in for hypercarbia, which produces acidosis and all these problems. But with the thrive mechanism, there is actually an exchange, and the CO2 elimination also starts occurring because of the higher removal of, higher volume of air
Yes.
going in, and the balance between the pressures up above and the cardiogenic pressures
Oxidation.
that are created in the thorax. Okay, so there was the elimination of carbon dioxide. And the other important thing is in the apneic oxygenation technique, the patients were paralyzed and they were not breathing. And but later on, they started using this high flow for spontaneously breathing patients also. Then only this thrive also was adapted to spontaneously breathing patients, where, as you see, you said in COVID patients also they are using. So one of the steps in the protocol for management of hypoxemia in COVID patient, first you start with nasal cannula, then you go for Hudson's mask, then you go for non-rebreathing mask, then you go for BiPAP or CPAP, and then you go for this high flow nasal oxygen. Thrive, all these things have been tried as a serial measure, and finally you go for mechanical intubation and mechanical ventilation. That is the protocol that is being followed in many centers for managing the various grades of hypoxemia produced in ARDS. Okay, so and this machine, how is it able to give that high flow with 70 liters, 60 liters? That description of that machine also you have to give. There is a airflow generator, there is a blender for oxygen, there is a humidifier. Then, so the parameters that you can adjust here are the airflow, the FiO2, the temperature of the oxygen that is delivered. So all these things you have that, and you should be able to at least draw a line diagram of this apparatus so that it will give a much more better clarity in your answer. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Vasanthi, you have to add something.
Yes, I think most of it you covered excellently. I think more than what Sai said. I think you said everything. Only thing is, like, what he can do is, you start with saying indications for Thrive. Then you say how it is being administered. Then you say the difference between HFNC and Thrive. And then you say the advantages. Then you say the disadvantages. What are the disadvantages of Thrive? I don't think you said anything.
Yeah,
or
that
maybe
is
even
especially in
that's another
COVID, if
thing
you are
which
going to do some, there is a controversy whether it can be used because of aerosol generation. Okay, especially the
yeah, that's
procedures
one thing.
where. And in
And also
aerosol, you have to
obstructive
give a
airways.
difference between droplet and the aerosol. Droplet is a direct
Yes.
ballistic drop, a bigger 5 micron on bigger sizes, which can directly be expelled from the infected person, but it goes directly down to the earth because of the gravity. whereas aerosol is much more smaller particles which can be suspended in the air for some time and has got a more infective nature compared to the droplet. Okay, so that point you have to mention. That's so people have some restriction in using these devices for COVID related treatment.
Also, it is ineffective, or it can even be contraindicated.
I think your mic is not on.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah. And I found one very useful mnemonic for this. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. So this high flow, actually, it has got a mnemonic. H stands for heated and humidified. I stands for it is able to deliver the inspiratory demand. Peak inspiratory flow is met. That word also you have to use in this particular description. And F for FRC, it is replacing the FRC from air to oxygen. And L for it is a lighter apparatus, unlike your CPAP or BiPAP masks, which are tied very closely to the face. This is a very light equipment, and it causes oxygen dilution. So it can determine whatever FiO2 you want. And lastly, it washes out the dead space. That is a very important point. So the high flow HIFLO, high for heat and humidity, I for inspiratory demand, that is peak inspiratory flow rate is met. F for replacement of FRC with oxygen, L for lighter weight of the equipment, O for oxygen dilution, and W for washout of dead space. Okay, so you can remember this mnemonic for description of the advantages of this particular machine also.
Okay.
Right.
Very
Okay.
nice, sir. Very nice. I didn't know. Nice.
Okay. Right.
You were saying something about the disadvantage, madam. From then onwards, we could not hear you, madam.
Yeah, that's what she was
Yeah,
telling about the contamination, the droplets and the aerosol spread, all these things. And
And upper airway obstruction, airway anomalies, intracranial pressure, increase in intracranial pressure, and all those things are kind of not indicated. Thrive is not indicated in those. I think that also you
and
need to mention.
the procedures you mentioned where it is useful, like laryngeal procedures and the bronchoscopy or scopy procedures, all these things, they are called tubeless anesthesia. That is another word they use. When you use Thrive for oxygenating the patient, it is called tubeless anesthesia. You don't put any even a microlaryngeal tube or a Coles tube or a smaller tube for doing these procedures. So they come under the category of tubeless anesthesia, but the duration is restricted. You can't do it for hours together. So for shorter procedures, definitely it is very useful. It gives a very clean feel for the surgeon to work out. And you share the airway without any fear of desaturating the patient. Okay.
Yes. Okay,
Right.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Who is the next one, Kamarshi?
Can we go ahead with the case presentation, sir? Dr. Lakshmi Priya, pregnancy.
Okay, the other two we don't want to finish now. Having started with the theory, but they are not available. Pratik and
Okay.
okay, right. Whatever you right. Whoever is available, we'll go ahead. Right.
Okay, sir. Dr. Lakshmi Priya is going to present the case of 37.
She is from
Is from Balaji, sir. Sri
Balaji. Okay, right.
Yeah. Over to Dr. Lakshmi Priya.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, my case presentation, 24-year-old female residing in Tambaram, who is a homemaker with a history of 9 months of amenorrhea and primigravida at 37 weeks of gestation, has come for safe confinement. History of presenting illness, priming at 37 weeks of gestation. Her last menstrual period was 7th April 2021. Expected date of delivery is 14th January 2022. No history of any headache, blurring of vision, no history of nausea, vomiting, no history of convulsions, no history of dyspnea or palpitation at present. Antenatal history. The first trimester, patient was conceived by spontaneous conception, confirmed by urine pregnancy test at 45 days of amenorrhea, booked an immunized patient, started on iron and folic acid, taking regularly, no history of vomiting or any significant illness in the first trimester, dating scan done at 8 weeks, no history of any other drug therapy. In the second trimester, patient was able to perceive the fetal movements at 20 weeks, taking calcium and iron folic acid regularly. 2 doses of TT injection was given. Anomaly scan was done and it was found to be normal. No history of bleeding per vaginum, headache, blurring of vision or epigastric pain. No history of diabetes or hypertension. Regular antenatal checkups were done. OGTT was done and it was within normal limits. In third trimester, patient was able to perceive the fetal movements well. Growth scan was normal. No history of bleeding or leaking per vaginum. No history of fever or UTI. No history of diabetes or pregnancy-induced hypertension. No history of any heartburn, chest pain, palpitation, or syncope. Past history, no history of any chronic illness, diabetic, bronchial asthma, ischemic heart disease, epilepsy, or thyroid disorders. No history of any drug allergy. No history of blood transfusion. No history of any previous surgeries. Menstrual history, attained menarche at 14 years of age. History of regular menstrual cycles, 3 to 4 days for every 28 days cycle. Normal flow of menstrual bleed. Marital history, married for 3 years, non-consanguineous marriage. Personal history, consumes mixed diet, normal bowel and bladder habits, no history of any addictions. Family history, no family history of diabetes, hypertension, of gestation, admitted for safe confinement. General examination, patient is conscious, oriented to time, place and person, afebrile, moderately built and nourished, height is 160 centimeters, weight is 68 kgs, no pallor, icterus, clubbing, cyanosis, pedal edema, lymphadenopathy. Vitals are pulse rate 80 per minute, regular in rhythm, normal volume, normal character, no radial or radiofemoral delay, and it is felt in all peripheral vessels. Blood pressure 120 by 80 millimeters of mercury, measured in the left upper limb with patient in sitting position. Temperature is normal. Systemic examination, CVS, S1, S2 heard, no murmur, and in respiratory, bilateral hair entry is present. Normal vesicular breath sounds, no added sound. Respiratory rate is 16 per minute. Per abdomen examination, on inspection, abdomen longitudinally distended with flanks full, umbilicus everted, striae gravidarum and linea nigra is present, no dilated veins or scars seen. All quadrants moved equally with respiration. Palpation, fundal height corresponds to 36 weeks with flanks full, relaxed, cephalic in presentation. Fundal grip soft, non-palatable mass felt, suggesting breech. Right lateral grip, irregular structures suggesting limbs, and left lateral grip, curved structure, which is the spine. First pelvic grip, head, hard palatable mass felt, corresponding to fetal head is felt. Second pelvic grip, able to get under the head. On auscultation, fetal heart rate 136 per minute at left side, regular rhythm and good tone. CNS, GCS 15 bar 15, no focal neurological deficit. Airway examination, Mallampati grade 3, mouth opening adequate, admits 3 fingers, neck movements, normal inflection and extension. Thyromental distance is 5.5 centimeters, Sternomental distance is 13 centimeters. Spine is normal with mild lordosis. Breath holding time is approximately 15 seconds. No loose tooth, buck tooth, or any artificial dentures. Provisional diagnosis, 27-year-old female residing in Tambaram who is a homemaker with 37 weeks gestation is admitted for safe confinement.
She's a primey.
Yes, sir.
Did you mention that?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
In the beginning, 27-year-old prime.
Primey, yes. I think you missed that at the end of conclusion. Good. Why this case has been given? A normal pregnancy with no complications. What is the purpose of nowadays? I was told that such cases are kept to confuse the students because you always anticipate either a PAH or a twin pregnancy or some complication, gestational hypertension patients. These are the common cases that were being kept in the exam previously. But nowadays, I was told that they keep a normal pregnancy also. What do you think is the purpose of keeping such cases for the exam?
So a patient can be like proceeded with a normal labor, and if at all there is any circumstances of hemodynamic instability or the patient facing any eventful situations, the need of anesthetist will be there. So
Very good. Okay, one point.
then patient can opt for a painless labor and
Ah,
labor
excellent.
and
Excellent, excellent. That is the important role that you can play in a normal pregnancy, isn't it? Nowadays, the obstetric analgesia is becoming or picking up, or patients are getting more aware of that. So they may ask for a painless labor. So they may be coming with the idea that they will definitely seek the help of first tell the physician that they want a painless labor, and the physician may alert you that this lady is asking for that. So antenatally, you can examine the patient and see whether she is a fit candidate for a painless labor or not. All that can be decided. Okay.
yes, sir.
And commonly, what questions do you can expect if it is a normal pregnant patient kept in the examination? What questions you can expect from the examiner?
Maybe the labor analgesia, sir, and
Before that, labor analgesia is towards the end. The first and common thing that they will ask you is what are all the physiological changes that happen in a normal pregnancy. That question you should be able to answer all the various systems involved. Not
yes,
only in a normal pregnancy patient, but suddenly even in a PAH, they can jump and ask you the basics about this normal physiological changes and then ask you about the pathology that can happen.
yes,
Isn't it? So we will recall and recollect our knowledge on this normal physiological changes. Can you enumerate the various changes that happen in the various systems?
yes, sir.
Hmm.
Starting from patient's body weight, sir, approximately there will be 17% of increase in body weight, that is 12 kgs. So the uterus is about uterus with amniotic fluid, there will be an increase in 1 kg. Fetus with the placenta of 4 kgs, and blood volume and interstitial fluid of 2 kgs, and the new fat and protein of about 4 kgs, sir. So the normal weight gain in first trimester would be 1 to 2 kgs. In second trimester, roughly around 5 to 6 kgs, and in third trimester, 5 to 6 kgs.
Very good.
In serious changes, there is a cardiac hypertrophy due to increased blood volume and increase in the force of contractions. So there will be elevation of diaphragm and all. So the third heart sound and will be heard in the third trimester. Fourth heart sound in 16% of the pregnant women will be heard, sir. Mostly there might be grade 2 systolic ejection murmur at the left sternal border can be heard.
Is it an organic murmur or a functional murmur?
The functional.
Functional murmur. Okay.
Plasma volume,
Plasma volume, there will be increase in the plasma volume of 50%.
What is physiological anemia of pregnancy?
So initially there will be increase in the plasma volume of 50%, and the red blood cells will be increased roughly around 35%, sir. So compared to red blood cells, the plasma volume is more. So this accounts for physiological anemia in pregnancies.
So how do you distinguish between a real anemia and a physiological anemia? Supposing this lady comes from a very low socioeconomic group. She might be anemic even before pregnancy. So in that case, what will happen?
With the help of peripheral smears.
Peripheral smear. Okay.
Microcytic hypochromic anemia as nutrition
Will there
deficiency.
be any change in the hematocrit? Will there be any gross difference?
Due to hemodilution, then
The hematocrit value will be altered, isn't it?
yes,
So physiological anemia, you say there is a comparative increase in the plasma to the red blood cells. But in an anemic patient, becoming more anemic because of pregnancy, the hematocrit, there will be more of plasma and very much less of the
RBC.
RBCs. Okay, so that itself will be a easy method of identifying existing anemia complicated by the physiological anemia. Okay,
Yes.
right.
What is the
What
normal
about the pulse?
hematocrit? What is the normal
What is the
hematocrit versus hemoglobin?
relationship between hematocrit and hemoglobin? That's what madam is asking. How many times?
It's 35% hematocrits.
No. Ratio. Supposing you have 10 grams hemoglobin, what is the hematocrit you can expect?
1:3, sir.
30.
30. So in anemia, what will happen?
It will decrease.
RBC may be only 6 or 7,
Yes.
but the hematocrit will be not exactly 3, it will be much more than that.
Yes.
Isn't it? So that is the way you find out, right?
Yes.
Then what about the pulse rate, the cardiac output, each and everything about cardiovascular system, first you have to describe, isn't it?
The cardiac output is increased to 50%, sir. The stroke volume is increased to 25%. The heart rate is increased to 25%. The ejection fraction will be increased, and the pulmonary there won't be any change in pulmonary capillary wedge pressure and pulmonary artery diastolic pressure.
Very
The
good.
systemic vascular resistance will be decreased to 20%.
Very good. So diastolic BP will be reduced or normal?
Same.
It will be reduced, isn't it?
Yes.
So pulse pressure, what will happen to the pulse pressure?
Pulse pressure will be reduced.
Increase. Why it? See, systolic pressure is little normal or high, and diastolic pressure is reduced. So what will
Reduced.
happen to the pulse pressure will increase, isn't
Increase.
it?
Yes.
Instead of 120, 80 means pulse pressure is 40.
Yes.
But 120, 60 means pulse pressure is 60.
60.
So what will be the character of the pulse if the pulse pressure increases?
Why?
Bounding.
Bounding.
This is the joke I always used to say in the movies, you know, the marriage hall, the bride will be suddenly fainting, and the village physician will come and touch the pulse of the lady and say, oh, this lady is pregnant. How do they find out they're not here? That is because of the bounding pulse. Okay. So
Yes.
that is what is happening in most of the cases. So that is the character of that pulse in the pregnant woman.
Yes.
Right. Then coming to respiratory system, what are all the changes?
In respiratory system, in anatomy, the thoracic cage will be enlarged in circumference by 5 to 7 centimeters during pregnancy, and there will be increase in both the anterior-posterior and transverse diameters. So the vertical measurement of the chest will be decreased by 4 centimeters as a result of elevated position of the diaphragm. Diaphragm, sir. So the regarding the lung volumes, there will be increase in the inspiratory reserve volume. The tidal volume will be increased to 45%. Expiratory reserve volume will, and the residual volume will be decreased by 25% and 15% respectively. The lung capacities, inspiratory capacity will be increased. The FRC, the functional residual capacity, will be decreased by 20%. The vital capacity and the total lung volume, there won't be any changes.
So what is the importance of this decrease in the FRC?
So in case of during intubation at the time of apnea, the patient go for hypoxia much faster compared to the other patients due to the reserve of the FRC is less. So
Lesser.
the reserve is
Desaturate
less.
much faster.
Desaturation is much faster.
Very good. So what about the ABG? How will the ABG of a pregnant woman, normal pregnancy woman will be? What is the value you expect in an ABG?
In the ABG, there will be increase in PaO2 of 10%, sir, and PaCO2 will be decreased.
You always start with the pH, isn't it? First pH, then PaO2, PCO2, like that. If you describe, it will be better. Will there be any change in the pH? Will it be towards alkalosis or towards acidosis?
Towards the alkalosis.
Mild alkalosis will be there. Why?
Because the patient will be hyperventilating, so there will be carbon dioxide washout and mild alkalosis will be there.
So there is a decrease in PCO2. So there is a slight shift towards the alkalosis. What is the reason for this? Why should a normal pregnant woman have a mild alkalosis and a decrease in PCO2?
Because of carbon dioxide washout, sir.
No. Why that nature has made it in such a way that she expels more carbon dioxide compared to a non-pregnant woman? What is the reason? Why should this happen? Why should this change take place in a pregnant woman?
The demand is more compared.
Demand of what?
Demand of oxygen is more, sir.
That means there should be more carbon dioxide production, isn't it? But they are washing out the carbon dioxide.
What about the
and they are-
baby? What about the baby?
Fetus carbon dioxide is all.
Is the fetus breathing inside the uterus?
No, sir. The metabolic.
But it has got its own metabolism and it produces its CO2, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So if a pregnant woman has a normal CO2 like PaCO2 like a non-pregnant woman, say 40 millimeters of mercury, and the baby also has a 40 millimeters of mercury, will the carbon dioxide from the baby be able to transport it to the maternal circulation?
No, sir.
It cannot, isn't it?
Yes.
So there is a small gradient there for the to facilitate the removal of the CO2 from the fetus towards the mother who is going to expel it out for the baby. Okay.
Yes.
So nature is so intelligent that it is giving this change in the pregnant woman to facilitate the expulsion or removal of the CO2 produced by the fetus, whose lungs are not going to function till the baby is born. Okay, so that is the main reason for this, right? But this alkalosis, what will it do to the oxygen dissociation curve?
This alkalosis will, like, there is
Also
a mild
shift to the left or
towards
shift
the
to
left.
the right? Huh?
Mild shift to the left, sir.
Shift to the left means will it be able to deliver the oxygen to the baby?
No, sir. It will like retain to the mother only. There won't be delivery to the oxygen.
Then the child will become hypoxic, isn't it? So how
Yes.
is that managed?
Increasing the rate.
This is a normal physiology which we have to understand. Okay. So there is a trick in this. The CO2 is low to facilitate CO2 elimination from the baby, but this will result in decreased oxygen supply to the baby. That also cannot be accepted.
Yes.
But nature is again intelligent that it increases the 2,3 dpg level to shift the oxygen from the mother to the baby. Okay, even though the gross shift to the left will not happen, there is an increase in 2,3 dpg which will facilitate the transfer of oxygen adequately to the baby. So this point is the majority of the times I have found students not understanding this at all. So this is the change in the respiratory function. So this anemia also facilitates faster this thing. Okay, so these are the things that you have to understand with the. Then which system is important after cardiovascular and respiratory system? Which other system changes are very important to you as an anesthesiologist?
GIT.
Hmm?
GIT, sir. Like,
GIT, excellent, very good. GIT, why you are concerned about GIT? Why you are so hesitant to say that? You are right. GIT is what is the reason for the GIT changes that which concerns you as an anesthesiologist? What is the common saying? A pregnant woman, whether starving or eaten, is always considered as a full stomach patient, isn't it? All of the teachers would have told you about that. Why it is happening?
because there is upward and anterior displacement of stomach by the uterus, growing uterus.
Okay.
So the lower esophageal sphincter will be like pushed to, will be
Listen.
laxed, sir.
Hmm.
And there is more chance of aspiration because of this during the
See, whenever you talk about GIT changes, if you don't mention one particular terminology, your answer will not be complete. Can you tell me what is the terminology? Have you heard of
Why is
barrier
there
pressure?
stasis?
yes, sir.
Why is
Barrier
there stasis?
pressure.
Barrier pressure.
That is a very important terminology.
Yes,
So
sir.
there is a delay in this gastric emptying, number one. Number
Yes.
two, when the stomach gets pushed up, the normal angle between the fundus of the stomach and the lower part of the esophagus is obliterated. It becomes almost like a straight line.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The third point is the progesterone causes a relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter so that the barrier pressure, normally the lower esophageal sphincter tone and the pressure is higher than the intragastric pressure. Whereas when a pregnant woman, because this lower esophageal sphincter pressure becomes lesser, the intragastric pressure overtakes or becomes higher than the lower esophageal sphincter pressure. So there are two things that can happen. One is there can be a silent regurgitation, or there can be a active propulsion much faster. If the patient has got a vomiting feeling, the propulsion will be much more faster and more larger in quantity. That will cause a sudden aspiration. And if it gets aspirated, what is that condition called?
Mendelssohn syndrome.
Mendelssohn syndrome. So if Mendelssohn syndrome occurs, how will you manage that?
So immediately we should like change the position of the patient, sir. As in
Hmm.
turn the patient to head to the lateral, keep a head down position, sir, so that further aspirates will be pushed towards the oropharynx. You can
Okay.
suctioning the oropharynx.
Now, unfortunately, the whole thing,
Circulating them.
quite a sizable amount has got aspirated into the trachea and lungs. So what will be the picture in that situation? What will happen to the patient if it has got aspirated?
As
Hmm?
these
No, what will the patient complain? What will be the picture or what will be the clinical findings that you will see in that patient? Will the patient have a normal oxygen saturation at that level?
desaturation.
He will desaturate. Will they have a normal respiration if they are breathing spontaneously? That
Yes,
is
sir.
during induction before giving the relaxant, this has happened, unfortunately.
Yes,
So what will happen to the respiratory rate of the patient?
it will increase.
It will increase, isn't it?
Yes.
The reflex response to hypoxia is increase the respiratory rate and try to increase the depth. Okay.
Yes.
So that is a patient will start having tachypnea. Then
Yes.
what will happen to the, if you auscultate, what will you find?
Mike Krebs will.
Extensive rales and rhonchi will be there, isn't it?
Yes.
Why the rhonchi?
Because of the aspirate passing into the trachea and getting into the lungs. So that
You'd never expected this question to be asked in this, isn't it? So what do they aspirate? What is the nature of the aspirate that is coming from the stomach? It is
the
an
gastric
acid. Isn't it?
acid
This is a highly acidic solution, isn't it? What is the pH of that?
less than 2.
Less than 2, isn't it? 2.5
Yes,
or
sir.
maximum 2.5, usually less than that, isn't it? So it's highly acidic fluid. So when it goes into the respiratory passage, it causes a severe violent irritation. And so all the smaller areas will go in for acute constriction or spasm. And that is the cause of the wheezing. And the fluid that is entering causes the rales. Okay.
Yes.
So this is how the patient will desaturate and go for severe acute hypoxemia. So in that situation, what is your management?
So I will first try to secure the airway of the patient. Sir.
Very good.
Um,
Then,
like with the RSI, I'll intubate the patient.
very good.
Then via the ET tube, I will aspirate if there is any gastric contents,
Very good.
allowable gas.
So remove whatever the present in the upper airway. You can't go down up to the alveolar level and remove all those things, isn't it? So whatever present in
With
the
positive
trachea and
pressure.
bronchi. So positive pressure, if you give, it will all go further down.
Further down. Yes.
So how will you neutralize this acid?
With like we can in pre-op, we considering the patient has a full stomach, we can give anti-aspiration
That
prophylaxis.
is all prophylactic. Now it is no. This scenario is patient has already aspirated. You have put in an endotracheal tube and secured the airway. You have aspirated whatever is available in the trachea and the major bronchi by putting a large suction catheter. How will you prevent further irritation of the acid that is present in the respiratory passage? Can you put in some neutralizing agent?
So
What is the neutralizing agent for an acid? Alkali.
bicarbonate.
Can you put in bicarbonate and then try to neutralize that? Yes, you can do.
Yes, sir.
Yes, bicarbonate mixed in saline, you can instill into the respiratory passage and try to suck out so that you can neutralize whatever further acid that is there. And then give bronchodilators. And then, which is the most important drug in emergency situations to prevent edema or the reaction?
Steroids.
Hydrocortisone.
Hydrocortisone.
Short acting, yes. Specifically, hydrocortisone 200 milligram to be given, and bronchodilators can be given, and try to maintain the oxygenation. Okay.
Yes.
So, what will be the sequelae or further complications of that? Even if you do successfully reoxygenate the patient and prevent the or correct the desaturation,
Pneumonia.
yeah, they can go in for pneumonia. So, what does the anticipate treatment you should give to prevent that severity of the pneumonia? Antibiotics, empirical antibiotics, high broad spectrum antibiotics have to be started, and you have to take an X-ray chest, watch the patient in the post-operative period, and treat it as a consolidation or a pneumonia, which is going to definitely develop later on. Okay, so these are all. So GIT is a very important, and all these changes you should be able to sequentially say, not just the elevation of the stomach. You must be able to explain why that elevation is important, because it abolishes the angle. Then there is this barrier pressure is a very important term that you should use in description of the GIT changes. Okay. Then what about renal? What are the changes that happen in the renal system?
Renal system, due to increase in the blood volume, there will be increase in the GFR also, sir.
Very good.
So,
So what is the importance of that? Increase in GFR, so increase in urine production or less urine production?
there will be increase in urine production.
Urine production. What about the urea and creatinine?
Urea and creatinine will, the creatinine will be like less pronounced compared to the normal patient.
That's why that is important. Normally,
So
what is the normal
patient-
creatinine value?
0.8 to 1.2.
0.8 to 1.2. Supposing this pregnant woman has got only 0.6.
So it is still considered to be normal.
Normal. Supposing it is 1.2 in a pregnant woman, will it be considered normal or abnormal?
No, sir, abnormal. Compared to the blood volume and increased in GFR, the creatinine has to be decreased.
Yes.
So if it is increased, the patient is having renal pathology.
So you have to investigate for renal pathology. Okay, that is another thing. What about the musculoskeletal system? What are the changes that happen?
There will be lordosis in view of like fetus, be lordosis, and also
Supposing she asks for labor epidural, so this musculoskeletal system change, in what way it will pose some problem for you?
Basically, due to increased level of relaxation, then edematous, the patient is edematous, so the
Why should a normal woman become edematous? Normal pregnancy woman, do you think she will become edematous at the back? That means it's something wrong with that patient.
increased
At
fat.
least if you say ankle edema, it is acceptable because of venous stasis or compression by the gravid
Started
uterus.
right, Lakshmipriya, you started right? You started right. You said something about relaxation. You started right. And then why are you just jumping off to saying something else?
So normally if the ligaments are tough or soft,
Yes.
eh?
The ligaments will be lax. There will be lax
So
ligaments.
identification of epidural space, you may miss
Epidural
and go
space.
overshoot and make a dural puncture, isn't it?
Yes.
That is why it is considered as a little difficult, isn't it? So that change is important again concerning you if the patient is going to ask for labor epidural.
Labor.
Okay? And you should know that there is a alteration in the curvature of the spines
Of the
also.
spine.
So all these things you should keep in mind when you perform the epidural. And
Okay.
supposing you make a accidental dural puncture, what is the consequence of that?
Hemet,
Huh?
PDP,
Will the PDPH be very severe or less in this patient?
severe,
Severe. Why? Why severe compared to a non-pregnant woman?
because the epidural space will be decreased. Epidural veins pressure will make the subarachnoid space less, and the pressure will be more.
CSF pressure inside will be more. So
Yes.
more leakage will happen and more severe
Then
will be the headache. Okay.
into the trivial trauma, there will be a
What,
more.
what are the methods of treating a PDPH? If it has happened and patient is
Fluid.
complaining of severe headache, what are the steps or protocol you should follow in the treatment of a PDPH?
Ask the patient to lie supine,
Very
adequate
good.
IV fluids.
A pregnant
Uh,
woman, can you ask her to lie supine, especially at 37 weeks of pregnancy?
no, sir, left lateral.
Hmm. So you must think before you answer all these points. It's not like a normal patient, isn't it? So
Yes.
why you want the patient to have a slight tilt?
Condition. There will be
Supine hypotensive syndrome of pregnancy or aortic caval compression syndrome. Okay,
Yes.
so you want to avoid that, you want to do that.
Yes,
So,
sir.
okay, supine position with a left lateral or right lateral tilt, number one treatment. Okay, then
Adequate IV fluids, sir.
adequate hydration, okay, in the form of both oral and IV fluids. Right, then
Caffeine intake,
simple analgesics like caffeine, paracetamol. Okay,
paracetamol.
right, then. Normally, in a non-pregnant patient, whether male or female, what will be the other advice along with supine position and fluids and paracetamol? What other things are supposed to help? Do you put any abdominal binder or some belt or something like that?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
So, in this pregnant woman, she has a huge uterus there. Can't it act as an abdominal binder?
Oh, sir.
Why?
Cannot. It will further compress the.
It will dilate the veins in the epidural space further. Okay. So the pressure, that is how it increases. Whereas in the normal non-pregnant patient or an adult male also, when you give a binder, you are the veins are not dilated. Okay.
Yes.
So you are trying to increase the pressure so that it seals the hole. It acts on the opposite direction. Whereas here it will be leaking more.
It's more.
Right. So that is right. Then what else? Supposing all these simple measures don't relieve the pain, what else you can do? Ultimately,
Big.
epidural blood patch, isn't it?
Yes.
So how do you do an epidural blood patch for an intractable PDPH?
So we should take a patient's blood, sir, roughly around 15 to 20 ml of it, and like
Do the
via the
punch at the
epidural,
same
same epidural procedure we have to perform.
same
Then,
level or one level above or below? What is the ideal one? Supposing you have first tried at L3, L4 epidural and you have made a dural puncture. So blood patch, which level you will do?
one
What
level
will-
above.
One level above. So you go for L2, L3 instead of the same route. Okay, and deposit about 20 to 30
20
ml of
ml
blood.
of
What is
blood.
the mechanism? How does it help?
It, it will cover the
It will cover the hole with what?
hole with the blood.
Fibrin. Okay,
Fibrin.
that blood will clot there and fibrin formation will happen. And fibrin will, it is like putting a glue. Tire puncture achinaka, yes, you put a sealant and try to close the hole, isn't it? Same mechanism. You just put a fibrin glue there and then try to. Is there any recent technique for PDP treatment without all this hassle of epidural blood patch and supine position and all these things? Something connected with the nose, because it is going to cause only headache, isn't it? Post-dural puncture headache.
Yes.
Can this headache be relieved by some simple technique through the nose?
Come
Can
from
do
where is the pain?
spinopalatine ganglion block by putting you can just take a Johnson bud, dip it in 4% xylocaine and stuff it into the nose and keep it there for a few seconds. It's supposed to completely relieve the headache. Okay, spinopalatine ganglion block. Okay, that is the latest one that has been tried and it has been found successful also, right? Okay, so these
It
are
is
all the
quite good, sir. Sir, it is quite good. Sir. Actually, I tried it.
yeah.
Because there was one patient who wanted to have epidural blood patch. Up to that level she had gone, and then I just wanted to try for just to know what it is, and it works. Sir.
Yeah. So unless it is worked, nobody will publish that. Isn't it? So it has been published and approved also, has been as one of the techniques of treating PDPH. Good. So right. So all these things are there. So system wise, you must be thorough with all these things. You should be able to rattle off all these answers because they consider this as a very basic knowledge of any pregnant woman the anesthesiologist should be aware of. Okay. So cardiovascular, respiratory, gastrointestinal, renal, hepatic also. What are the changes in the hepatic system?
There'll be cholestasis.
Cholestasis.
So more chances of cholelithiasis in a pregnant
And yeah,
patient.
acalculous cholecystitis also is very common, isn't it? They need not be having a calculus. Without that, they can get a cholecystitis.
And the serum levels of bilirubin, ALT, and AST, lactate dehydrogenase, they all move to the upper limits of the normal range of during the pregnancy. Sir.
Right. Okay. So we'll stop the discussion at that level. Now, this, as I told earlier, if the lady has come with an idea of having a painless labor and she wants labor analgesia, how will you? What are all the available modalities for providing the pain relief?
So available model, as in like.
Right from the beginning of the supposing she's a very educated lady, she's 27 years old, so she's quite well experienced and she's in the IT industry, so she Googles and finds out that painless labor is possible. So right from the first trimester when she comes to the physician, she says, Madam, I don't want any pain at all. I want to deliver a baby without pain. So what are all the things that you can start from the antenatal period itself to motivate
So
her
we
or
can
to
advocate the patient to like undergo yoga exercises and breathing exercises.
Very good. Okay, all these antenatal preparations you do, and then finally she lands up with the expected date of delivery with a mild false pains. She has come to the hospital. So at that time, what are the things that you can do? How do you differentiate between a false pain and a true labor pain?
So there will be regular contractions and followed by the pain will like pass over from the around the hip to the gluteal region and to the inner aspects of thigh and all, in case of if it is true labor pain.
The
And
pattern of pain and the frequency, and along with the uterine contraction, as a doctor or the patient, they themselves should touch the uterus and see whether it becomes very
this is
hard and tight.
time.
So
Yes.
that is how you have to differentiate between the false pain, otherwise
False pain,
also
other
called
pain.
as, what is the name for the false pain? Any name is there? Braxton Hicks contractions.
Yes.
So then you go for this thing, right? So what stage you can go for an epidural, labor epidural? What are the stages of labor?
So labor epidural, in the first stage, it starts from regular uterine contraction to complete dilatation of the cervix.
Still
Second stage,
Mm.
sorry, cervix. Second stage is the full dilatation of cervix to the childbirth, and third stage is from the childbirth to the expulsion of the placenta.
Placenta.
So
Very
in the
good.
first stage, it is going to be stretching of the lower uterine segments and the cervix, which is the pain will be carried out by mechanoreceptor C receptors. So and it is a visceral type of pain in the lumbosacral area, gluteal region, and thighs. So basically, we can level of blockade must be from P10 to L1. In addition, like we can give even the paracervical block, lumbar sympathetic chain block also. So in the second stage of labor, the patient will experience a somatic pain which is sharp and well localized. So this is due to the distension of pelvic structures and the perineum. So the somatic nerve fibers they are carried through the pudendal nerve to the reach the spinal cord at S2 and S4. So in the second stage of labor, we can perform a pudendal nerve block, or we can give a labor analgesia right from T10 to S2.
That's true. Very good. Right.
So
So this is the method that you are following, right? So what is the concentration and what is the volume that you will give for producing this labor analgesia?
Concentration can be bupivacaine of 0.125% or 0.0625%. And if it's a ropivacaine, it is 0.1% of ropivacaine can be given, sir.
Very good.
As a volume of 8 to 10 ml can be given initially, and followed by as and when the patient's demands are there with increase in pain, we can give boluses of local anesthetic with lower concentrations.
What are the current trends or methods of labor epidural? Do you have to manually push a bolus every time when the patient complains of pain, or there is advancement?
There is like a we can give us an infusion, sir, and also intermittent continuous infusion or patient controlled epidural can be given, and something called like a computer integrated patient controlled epidural analgesia is there, and
Very good.
combined spinal epidural, and also recent advances like ultrasound guided neuraxial technique, and using of novel laws of resistance technique, and epidrum can be there, sir. Like when we pass the epidural needle, the epidrum is attached to the pivotal, and due to the negative pressure, suddenly the diaphragm will be sucked up, sir. And also there is EpiSure, the auto detect syringes. These
That
are
is
the
that instrumental changes. Okay.
Yes.
So what you have mentioned is correct. Patient control, computerized program, all these things are correct answers.
Yes,
But
sir.
okay, when will you stop giving the epidural analgesia? Always
Once
we talk about instituting the epidural for a pain relief, isn't it? So when will you stop and remove the catheter? Immediately after childbirth or after
after the
for
expulsion of placenta, sir. Until then, the patient will experience pain.
so once the placenta is expelled and then
Post-op pain.
patient is transferred to the post-op ward, you will, I mean, the ward, you will remove the catheter or you will keep it for another 2 or 3 hours.
There will be like we can keep it for 2 to 3 hours also, sir. Like the patient, if the patient is undergoing normal labor, she would have undergone episiotomy sutures and all.
Very
so the
good.
pain will be for
Especially primary, there is a possibility
primary.
that she can go for an episiotomy. So if there is an episiotomy, you can even keep it for 24 hours post-op.
24 hours.
Okay.
Yes.
So it depends on whether the delivery is done without episiotomy or with episiotomy. Okay.
Yes.
So that is the catch in that question. So you
Yes.
don't have to immediately remove and shift the patient to the ward. You can
Yes.
keep it depending upon this particular delivery. Okay, that point is very important. Right. Supposing after delivery the placenta is not coming out, what is that called? Baby is delivered, cord has been clamped and cut, and baby removed and given to the pediatrician or neonatologist,
Yes.
but the placenta is not coming out. What is it called? What is this condition called? Hmm? It is retained inside the uterus.
Retained product.
It is called retained placenta, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
You should have learned all these things in your undergraduate OG curriculum itself, isn't it?
Yes.
So what do you do if there is a retained placenta? What is the request the physician will make to you in case there is a retained placenta, which can happen in normal labor delivery also sometimes. So how do they remove that? Manual evacuation.
Manual evacuation. Yes.
The physician will put her hand inside and try to separate and then try to pull out that, isn't it?
Yes.
Does it require any anesthesia for that? Manual removal or extraction of the placenta?
And that is painful, sir. So the
Yeah,
patient will.
it's quite painful. So if there's a labor catheter, that it's, epidural catheter is there, that is a boon for that to be carried out without pain. But in case you have not given any epidural, patient refused epidural, she didn't want that, and she undergoes a normal labor and then finally gets stuck with a placenta inside. What will you do? And there is a distress call from the physician. I have to do a manual removal. Please come and help. How will you give anesthesia?
We can give TIVA, sir, like totally intravenous.
TIVA. So after all, after 5 minutes procedure, it's a well dilated uterus. Only thing, the insertion of the fingers and then trying to manipulate that is a little painful thing.
Yes. Sedation.
So you IV sedation with what?
Fentanyl.
Fentanyl you can give. But fentanyl, what are all the drawbacks? Will it get excreted in the milk to affect the baby?
Yes, sir. So
Yes.
we have to wait for another 1 hour of giving fentanyl to feed the
So can you
baby.
think of something else which is a very short acting at the same time very effective method of analgesia? After all, the physician says just for 2 minutes, doctor, now hand about pudichirukandikkan, that's all. It will take hardly 2
Can you
to
hold
5
the
minutes.
mask? Can you hold the mask?
Yes, ma'am. We can like
Or any other more effective method intravenously? Low dose of something?
eat them.
Low dose ketamine. That is considered the major advantage, low dose ketamine of not the anesthetic dose of 1 to 2 milligram IV, but 100 to 200 micrograms IV. Okay.
Yes.
Maximum for an adult 10 to 15 milligram diluted and given IV wonderfully works for all these short procedures. Okay. So that at the same time, there is no emergence delirium, there is no unwanted tachycardia, hypertension, all these things are not there. Okay.
Yes.
So that can be done also this thing, right? So these are all the ways a normal pregnancy can be discussed. And of course, in between a normal pregnancy, if she develops a non-obstetric condition, then that question also can come in this. Supposing this lady develops an acute appendicitis or twisted ovarian cyst pain during the 24th or 26th week of pregnancy, what will you do?
If the patient is going for this, like opted for a surgery, sir.
So this non-obstetric surgery, the main important concern where the answering pattern should be whether it is going to affect the uterus or the mother. That is the first thing. So at what stage of pregnancy the surgery is going to be done? If it is less than 12 weeks or the first trimester, then teratogenicity should be the major concern, and premature labor or abortion is very, very common. And later on,
Time to perform is second trimester.
second and third trimester are quite safe, but still the possibility of a premature labor should be discussed with the patient. Okay, that is all you have to think. And there is no contraindication for any regional technique like single spinal or epidural at any stage of labor or any stage of antenatal period. Okay, depending upon the surgery, you can definitely choose. And upper limb or lower limb surgeries can be done with a perplexus or nerve blocks also. Okay, so this is the cross idea that you should have. Okay, right. So Vasanthi, anything else to discuss? I think she has left. Okay. Kamachi, I think we will stop the discussion there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good.
Thank you, madam.
Lakshmi Priya, you answered well, ma. Good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Shall we move on to the next theory question, sir?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Next, Dr. Who is ready, Pratik or Dr.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening, Pratik. Happy
So,
New Year to you.
He will talk about the angiotensin II agonist.
So today's topic for my discussion is angiotensin 2 agonist, sir.
Yeah.
To begin with, sir, angiotensin 2, I will describe first the angiotensin 2, then I will go to the agonist part, sir.
Yeah.
So angiotensin 2 is a naturally occurring non-catecholamine and is synthesized in a sequential manner as a component of RAS system, that is renin-angiotensin system. Now I have drawn, sir, means that sequence-wise, step-wise I have drawn a decreased arterial pressure or sympathetic nervous system stimulation will lead to renin secretion from the JG cells of kidneys. JG cells are modified smooth muscle cells in the walls of efferent arterioles, which is immediately proximal to the glomerulus. So this renin will act on the renin substrate, that is angiotensinogen, which is produced in liver, and it's alpha-1 glycoprotein. And angiotensinogen is converted to angiotensin 1, sir, under the impact of renin. This angiotensin 1 will be converted to angiotensin 2 under angiotensin converting enzyme, which is present in the lungs, sir. And now this angiotensin 2, which is produced, it will act via AT1 receptor, that is type 1 receptor for angiotensin. And those are located in the kidneys, vascular smooth muscles, lungs, brain, pituitary, adrenal, liver, and heart, sir. Shortly, I am describing the action of angiotensin 2, sir. Increased proximal convoluted tubule resorption, increased aldosterone secretion, vasoconstriction, increased ADH release, so leading to water retention, increased thirst, and at the end, angiotensin 2 is inactivated by angiotensinogenase, which is 2 aminopeptidase A and angiotensin 1,7. So the principal effect of angiotensin 2 is vasoconstriction and decrease sodium and water excretion by kidneys. So vasoconstriction is mainly due to vasoconstriction is mainly due to small arterioles constriction, leading to increase in the total peripheral resistance, thus causing increase in the blood pressure, sir. And it causes small volume of venoconstriction also, therefore leading to increase in the venous return and thus increasing the cardiac output. While decrease in the sodium and water by kidneys is mainly due to stimulation of the aldosterone from the adrenals and ADH from the pituitary, sir. Sir, angiotensin 2 has a direct amount of action in the kidney also. It directly stimulates the kidney for preservation of water and sodium, sir. therefore increasing the extracellular fluid and thus increasing the pressure. So we can conclude that renin-angiotensin system plays a vital role in BP, blood pressure regulation, fluid and electrolyte balance, preservation of volume status, and vascular tone. Now coming on to the uses of angiotensin 2 and angiotensin 2 agonist drugs. Angiotensin 2 agonist drugs, example is a brand which is Giapreza, which is a synthetic human angiotensin 2 analog. So now coming on to uses. Historically, angiotensin 2 was discovered in 1930s, but its use has been documented after 1960s. Initially, it was used as a diagnostic tool for identification of preeclampsia, prevention of hypotension during anesthesia, and treatment of hypotension following ACE inhibitors overdose. Nowadays, mainly it is used for refractory shocks. Refractory shock is inadequate hemodynamic response to high dose of fluid and vasopressor resuscitation. It is commonly seen in critically ill patient. Around 6 to 7% develop refractory shock, and mortality is 40 to 60% in these patients, which is comparatively very higher as compared to other diseases. So refractory shock is a profound vasodilatation state along with marked tissue hypoxia. This vasodilation is attributed to increased in nitric oxide and decrease in innate vasoactive peptides like angiotensin 2, vasopressin, catecholamines, and cortisols. So non-catecholamine vasopressor support has emerged as an important idea in treatment of refractory shock. Therefore, using of angiotensin 2 has been studied widely under Ethos 3 trial, that is angiotensin 2 for treatment of high output shock, showed that angiotensin 2 significantly increased the mean arterial pressure, and it helps in the treatment of refractory shocks. Angiotensin 2 has been used for enhanced delivery of chemo and radiotherapy to a solid tumor by selectively increasing the blood flow of the tumor with angiotensin 2 locally when we inject it, therefore improving the tumor response and minimizing the healthy tissue damage. Fourth use is in acute kidney injury patients. Generally, AKI patients present along with septic shock. Therefore, it is associated with poor outcome due to systemic hypotension and intrarenal vasodilation, which is associated with decreased GFR. Angiotensin, due to AKI, renin, which is produced in the kidney, is decreased, thus leading to decreased production of angiotensin 2, and thus leading to innate and endogenously decreased angiotensin 2 production. Thus, when we give angiotensin 2 exogenously, better response is anticipated and has been described in the post-Ethos 3 trials. Angiotensin 2 in ARDS patients. Similarly, patients with septic shock were mostly present with ARDS, and due to ARDS, the pulmonary endothelial injury is there. Therefore, ACE enzyme, which is responsible for conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2, this step is not being carried out, and angiotensin 2 is decreased. So therefore, supplementation with exogenous angiotensin 2 is effective enough in supporting hemodynamic of the patient and improving the shock conditions. So doses of these drug is it's a wide range. Doses is generally 1.25 to 80 nanogram per kg per minute. Effectively, we should start from 20 nanogram per kg per minute, and it has to be titrated every 5 minutes up till by increment up to 15 nanogram per kg per minute PRN to achieve the targeted blood pressure. Maximum dose should be 80 nanogram per kg per minute. Sir. This Giapreza, which is a synthetic angiotensin 2 analog, comes with two concentration, 2.5 mg per ml and 5 mg per ml. Sir. So this is a very costly drug, therefore it has been not in this much use.
Routinely used.
Routinely used. So side effect which we see with angiotensin 2 analogs and angiotensin 2 are orthostatic hypotension upon cessation of the drug, increase in the systemic and pulmonary blood pressures, and other side effects are thrombocytopenia, fungal infection, tachycardia, hyperglycemia, deep vein thrombosis, and acidosis. So I'm concluding my parts.
Yeah. So all the points that you have given is available in this article, correct?
Yes, sir. I've gone through this article. So.
Yeah, right. So for the benefit of others who have not read this is a beautiful article from which Pratik Shukla has taken all the points, and I found this article is very, very useful. And all of you can go through this, and you will get all the points that what he mentioned available in this. So what we have to know is, in cases of refractory shock, whether it is of septic origin or other it is, what they have been found out is there is a profound vasodilatation and reduction in the systemic vascular resistance. And that because of that, the blood pressure does not go down, go up. So we were using all these days norepinephrine as a method of vasoconstricting these blood vessels, which is sometimes even after very high doses of norepinephrine, you find there is no desired response occurring in these patients. Then only they thought of the naturally occurring angiotensin II may be lacking in this patient, and that could be the reason why they are not responding. So they started their trials with that, especially as he said in high output cardiac failures. And then once they gave this angiotensin II, then it, because being a natural stimulant of vasoconstriction, it helped in increasing the peripheral resistance and bringing back the blood pressure, and other effects on the heart and blood volume. All these things simultaneously happen. So they found that good response and good recovery from the morbidity and mortality happened. So that is how this drug has come into play. But the main reason for not becoming so popular, still if you find a patient with a low BP and shock, you are always, the tendency is to go for fluid resuscitation followed by norepinephrine, and compare along with that augment the cardiac contractility with the dopamine or dobutamine, and manage this. This has have been the thinking. But now this angiotensin II has improved in cases of refractory shock. That is a very important term that you have to remember. So when the conventional measures have failed, you try this drug as a choice, and they have found a good response to that. Okay, and you can use both of them simultaneously in a guarded fashion. In case patients shows good response, you continue both these drugs along with this angiotensin and then try to improve the patient. That is what ultimately. But of course, this drug is not without its own side effects. Whatever he has mentioned is all there in that. And the dosage is usually we talk about micrograms, but here it is nanograms. That is the main difference. And the availability of this drug in two preparations, one is 2.5 mg per in 1 ml or 5 mg in 2 ml. Ampules are there. They should be adequately diluted, and then you have to use it like any other infusion. Okay. So all these points he has nicely mentioned. So I think that is more than enough for this question. Thank you. The other person is there, Kamachi?
Sir, there's one more question on Xenon, sir.
Uh,
Dr. Priyanka from Namalai, sir.
she is there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You can present.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good
Today my
evening.
topic is xenon. Xenon, which is a noble gas, derived its name from a Greek word strange, meaning because
Stranger.
of its stranger because of its rarity. It was first discovered in 1898, and it is a colorless, odorless noble gas found in Earth's atmosphere in trace amounts. A symbol of xenon is ZT with atomic number 54. Anesthetic property of xenon gas at room temperature. It is non-volatile, non-teratogenic with a MAC value of 63.1%. Blood gas partition coefficient is 0.115. Mechanism of action of xenon. It inhibits NMDA receptor non-competitively, especially at glycine site. At relevant doses of xenon, presynaptic effects are minimal. Xenon also inhibits nicotinic acetylcholine receptor like nitrous, which is the reason for spinal mediated analgesia. It also competitively inhibits 5-HT3A receptors, so it reduces PDPH. Most distinguishing feature of xenon from other similar gases is that it has no action on GABA A receptor. Clinical features, induction emergence, blood test coefficient is 0.115, so faster induction and emergence compared to other gases. This feature is useful in certain cardiac bypass surgeries and neurosurgery for better desirable outcome. Then CVS, cardiovascular system, better cardiovascular stability compared to other gases. Decrease in the heart rate is present, but it is not significantly seen in all the patients. In cardiac surgery, post-operatively, they have evaluated the level of plasma, cortisol, and epinephrine levels, which remains the same as in presynaptic level, pre-operative state, whereas in other gases it has drastically altered. Xenon can be safely used in cardiac patients as it does not show any retroitations in those cardiac unstable patients also. It is used as a fast track in cardiovascular surgeries because of its rapid emergence and desirable outcome. And CNS, normally activation of glutamate NMDA receptor causes neuronal injury, but normally inhibition of glutamate receptor causes neuronal injury, but here the xenon does not inhibit the glutamate GABA A receptors, so there is no neuronal injury, and it acts as a neuroprotective agent. So xenon has no action on this receptor, so it acts as a neuroprotective agent. In cases of head injury patients also, it shows better outcome, even though there is an oxygen deprivation to the patient for up to 90 minutes also it can be used. It produces a better result. It tends to increase the cerebral blood flow and ICT, but it can be neutralized by hyperventilation. Analgesia, xenon is more potent analgesic than nitrous oxide, and fentanyl requirement is also reduced when we use xenon. Toxicity, it has no malignant hyperthermic features or no teratogenicity. Pharmacoeconomics, the most important disadvantage of xenon is it is an expensive gas, so it is used in closed circuit and low flow anesthesia. The usage of this is 3 liters per hour, so the application in day-to-day practice is less, even though it was discovered 50 years ago. So due to this cost reason, it is not applied in many research purpose, so need more research in the clinical safety evaluation. Environmental effect, none. It has no environmental effect as compared to other gases like nitrous oxide, which has an ozone depleting property, and even other gases like sevoflurane and all volatile anesthetics has environmental greenhouse effect and all, but xenon has no such features because it is a naturally produced gas. That's all.
Very good. Excellent.
Yes.
So, as usual, if I am a moderator, I always like to add 1 or 2 more points than what it is. So
Yes,
you
sir.
can explain what is a noble gas. Why do you call it as a noble gas?
Sir, it is produced naturally without any.
That the name? There are other things, not only
Gases,
xenon,
noble
there
gases.
are argon also is noble gas. Why do you call all of them as noble gases?
They don't react with anything, sir.
Yeah, their outer shell is fully saturated with the
Yes, sir.
electrons.
Electrons.
Okay?
Yes, yes.
So they are not reactive. Okay, that is why they are called noble gases. Okay, so that
Okay.
explanation you can give. And what is the blood partition coefficient?
So 0.115. Sir.
112. Yeah, right. Okay. So that is the lowest among all the inhalation agents. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Even lesser than your nitrous oxide, which is about 0.47. Okay. So that is why it is has a very rapid induction and rapid emergence is there. Okay.
Yes.
So that point you can highlight a little bit more.
Okay.
And critical temperature and critical pressure. It is about 16.6 critical temperature and pressure is 52.8 atmospheres. So
Okay.
these two. And William Ramsay is the person who first detected it in 1898. If you are interested in history and if you can remember, William Ramsay is the person. Okay. And it atomic weight is 54 because it occupies that position in the periodic table. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Right. So otherwise, all the points we have mentioned. Very good. And
Okay,
you
thank
can use in a proportion of 80% to 20%. The mixture that you use for anesthesia is oxygen 20% and xenon 80%. That is the combination that you use. And
Okay,
as you said, because it's very expensive, they are thinking of reclaiming just like we are absorbing carbon dioxide and reusing the exhaled gases in the closed circle system. They are evolving methods to reclaim the exhaled xenon and reuse it, so recycle it and reuse it within the same thing, so that the consumption cost will be very much reduced. Okay, that point
yes,
also I can mention. Very
okay,
good.
sir.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Thank you.
Kamarshi, I
Thank
think.
you, sir. Thank you
Yeah,
for an
okay.
excellent session. Thank you, Vasti madam. Thank you. Thank you all participants. We will continue with similar sessions in the next. So next week, what is
Next
that?
week, I think it's a Pongal day. I think many of
So,
may not be available, so we'll have it on 21st.
yeah, okay, sir. Next session will be on 21st, sir.
Yeah. So
Okay.
wish you all a happy Pongal, those who are celebrating Pongal, and those who are also having a long holiday, please enjoy your holiday without getting any Omicron or Delta or COVID. Please be careful, and God bless you with good things in the new year to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. With the
Thank
permission,
you.
I will sign off the meeting.
Yeah.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.